Hey guys, it's Eddie and today I am back with another movie review for you all. Now today's movie has actually been requested of me to do, and I'm really thankful to the person who requested this of me because it's a fantastic film and I'm so glad that they suggested it because I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. So the movie that we will be reviewing today is Magnolia, starring Tom Cruise, Jason Robards, Philip Seymour Hoffman and Julianne Moore, to name but a few. Now, this movie follows the interweaving lives of several characters trying to find forgiveness, deal with the past, and look forward. And they're also trying to look for love and they're trying to get their lives sorted out. There's a lot of sadness, there's a lot of dealing with reality, and it's just all these characters trying to figure out their lives, basically. And it's too complex to explain all of them because there is a lot of different characters. They all have their own individual problems. But really, this film just encounters them sort of interlinking, meeting with each other, stumbling across each other's paths. And it's just, yeah, it's just a story of people meeting, and they're all in very different and very sad situations for most of the time. And I won't tell you all of them as well because I think it's much more fun for you guys to actually watch the film and find out for yourselves, because I found that the first time I watched it I had no knowledge of what each of these characters were going through, and then to watch them and find out what was happening for yourself is a really fun experience with this film. So I will leave that to you guys. But I had never heard of this film before it was suggested for me to review, but I was completely bowled over by it. Now, I will say that it is long-winded. It's over 3 hours long, so if you're willing to watch this film, and I would advise that you do, set aside, you know, a good 3 hours and really settle down, get yourself comfortable so you can watch and enjoy this film. That's what I did. I promise it's easier to get into than you think. You might think, oh my gosh, a 3-hour film, like, oh, that's going to be so boring. It's not. I think within the first, I don't know, 15-20 minutes I was completely engrossed, so it's far easier to get completely emotionally invested in this film than you would expect. Now, it begins with an opening monologue about chance, and it's about all these situations where things have happened by chance, but the narrator then describes the fact that some things don't happen by chance, some things happen for a reason, and we kind of come back to this throughout the movie, and it's really in the latter part that we begin to see why we were introduced with this narrative, this narrator's sort of monologue. It becomes very poignant when we see things happening to these characters and strange occurrences bringing them together and placing them in situations that were certainly meant to happen. But it really demonstrates, you know, that sort of introduction of a theme and then slowly touching on it, introducing it and clearing it up throughout the film. It really demonstrates the fantastic, clever and, you know, really effective piece of storytelling by Paul Thomas Anderson, who directed this film. And it caught it, you know, that theme of chance and things happening for a reason cuts through this mess of character storylines, and it really brings the whole film together, and it's so interesting. Now, it begins really with each character individually. It's kind of, I would say, like a more dramatic, more depressing version of Love Actually. I think that would be the best way to describe it. But you thoroughly enjoy watching all of these characters run and bump into each other. And I think watching those characters sort of run into each other is helped enormously by the fantastic direction of Paul Thomas Anderson. He sort of does these sweeping movements where you're first on one character and then it moves and suddenly, you know, you're at another character and they're in closer vicinity to each other than you would expect, and it's really interesting to see, you know, just how close these characters are operating within proximity to each other, and it's really cool. Now, I also liked the way that as you found out more about these characters, there would often be questions asked in one scene with one set of characters that was answered in another scene with another set of characters because they were interlinked. I don't want to spoil anything, so I'll just leave that. You'll know what I'm talking about when you watch the film, but it's really interesting, and it's a very clever method of exploring these characters, and I really enjoyed it. It sort of kept you on your toes, but it still gave you the answers that you were looking for, and I like that about a film. I think the performances were incredibly raw and just so full and brimming with emotion. I don't hear this film and the performances in it getting enough credit, actually. I mean, you hear films all the time that are like revered for their fantastic performances, but I've never heard of anyone saying, oh, do you hear of Magnolia? Yeah, the performances are amazing. No, but I think we should definitely touch on this a lot more, because I think that the acting placed you on those tenterhooks, that, you know, you really believed that these were their characters' lives, and these characters were just brought to life by this fantastic array of actors. It was heart-wrenching, and it really was like watching an acting masterclass, because the lineup was just a stunning cast. It really was. Now, all these raw emotions, these really real characters, were juxtaposed in scenes that were kind of surreal. Like, there's a scene towards the end where something very weird starts happening, but the whole point of that sort of weird phenomenon is that that is the thing that is supposed to be bringing these characters together. So therefore, you know, it's weird, and it makes you stop and think, but at the same time it doesn't feel out of place in the movie, and I think that's just the brilliance of this film. It feels like it's meant to happen, and I think that just ties in, shows how everything ties in perfectly with the theme that this movie is trying to bring to light. There's also I'm not really spoiling anything here. If anyone has watched Skins, they will know that there is a scene in the first series where all the characters start singing randomly, and they all start singing the same song, and that very same thing happens in this film, and it was strange, and it was kind of weird, but again, it didn't feel wrong, it didn't feel out of place. It felt like this was just, it fit perfectly with the tone of the movie. So I can only praise Paul Thomas Anderson's very clever direction in this film for that. Now, I think despite all of those moments, despite the sort of surreal, out of place moments, there was still a feeling that this was all completely natural. And I think that's partly because of the actors, because they brought such real and raw performances, but also just the tone of the film. Like, you felt that these were real people's lives, and at the same time you kind of felt like you were just watching them through a window. And I think that's because of Paul Thomas Anderson's, you know, fantastic sort of direction. You were watching from the outside, but that didn't make you feel like it was any less real, and that's what I liked about it. And I think the characters were just so beautifully written. They really made you care for them, and not only that, but you would have preconceptions about a character, you know, from first encountering them on screen, but then throughout the movie they would totally subvert your whole concept of who they really were. For example, Julianne Moore's character, you think in the beginning that she's just this, you know, gold-digging woman interested in only her dying husband's money, but that's not the case at all. She completely changes your whole perception of her, and I think that is incredibly interesting. And that happens with a lot of the characters, actually, where you think this about them for the entire duration of the movie, and then it's just with a word or a scene it's completely turned upside down, and I love that. It's absolutely fascinating, and it's a brilliant way of keeping the audience invested. I certainly was. So everyone was fantastic in this film. Tom Cruise's electrifying portrayal of Jack slash Frank was brilliant. I didn't expect that from him, and I think his performance was brilliant in this film. But I think one person stood out for me, and that was Philip Seymour Hoffman. He doesn't really have to speak, he just looks, and the heartbreak and the anguish and, you know, the desperation is so clear on his face. He's just one of those actors that everything is said in a look, and his little face just scrunching up when, you know, he begins to cry, and the emotion is just overwhelming. He really makes you feel things from his portrayal on screen. It's just beautiful acting. So yeah, for me, he stood out, but everyone was just brilliant. Seamless acting, fantastic cast, just phenomenal. So it was overall an ambitious film. It was clever, it had brilliant direction, which blended perfectly with a fantastic ensemble cast. And if I had to give this film a rating, I would give it 5 out of 5. I was absolutely delighted by this film. I didn't expect what I got from it, and I'm just so glad that it was suggested to me and I can finally get this review out. I'm sorry it's been late for the person who asked, but I hope you've enjoyed this review. I hope anyone who else has seen this has enjoyed this review. I would highly recommend you go and get this film, watch it, it's brilliant. So that is my take on Magnolia. I hope you've enjoyed this review, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!